Matt Lauer was the king of morning television. For more than 20 years, he sat on the couch of NBC's Today Show, interviewing presidents, covering Olympic Games, and waking up America with his charm and authority. At his peak, he was earning $25 million per year, had a net worth estimated at $80 million, and was considered one of the most trusted faces on television. On November 30th, 2017, NBC fired him in less than 24 hours after receiving a single complaint. Within weeks, multiple women came forward with allegations of sexual misconduct, rape, and workplace abuse that painted a picture of a man who had weaponized his power for decades. Today we're going to discover how Matt Lauer went from being America's favorite morning show host to one of the most reviled figures in the Me Too movement. Welcome to Celebrities Done. Matt Lauer's rise to the top was textbook American success. Born on December 28, 1957 in New York City, Matt grew up in a middle-class family and always dreamed of being on television. He started his career in the late 70s as a producer for various local news stations, working his way up through smaller markets. His big break came in 1989 when he was hired as a news anchor for WNBC in New York. He was handsome, articulate, and had that perfect blend of warmth and authority that executives look for in morning television hosts. Within a few years, he was being groomed for something bigger. In January 1994, NBC made a gamble that would pay off spectacularly. They hired Matt Lauer as the news anchor for the Today Show, and just 3 years later, in 1997, they promoted him to co-host alongside Katie Couric. The chemistry was instant. Matt and Katie became one of the most beloved duos in television history, dominating morning ratings and making the Today Show an unstoppable juggernaut. They covered everything from breaking news to celebrity interviews, from cooking segments to emotional human interest stories, and Matt was the glue that held it all together. He could be serious when interviewing world leaders, playful when bantering with celebrities, and empathetic when talking to ordinary Americans facing tragedy. The numbers were staggering. Under Matt's tenure, the Today Show consistently attracted around 4 to 5 million viewers every morning, crushing its competition at ABC's Good Morning America. The advertising revenue was enormous, generating hundreds of millions of dollars annually for NBC. Matt wasn't just an employee. He was the face of the network's most profitable franchise, and NBC rewarded him accordingly. His salary climbed from $7 million per year in the early 2000s to $15 million by 2010, and eventually peaked at $25 million per year by 2016. He had negotiated one of the most lucrative contracts in television news history. But money wasn't the only perk. Matt Lauer lived like royalty. He owned a massive estate in the Hamptons worth $36 million, complete with a horse farm and oceanfront views. He had an apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. He vacationed in luxury resorts around the world. He was friends with celebrities, politicians, and business moguls. He was invited to the most exclusive parties, the most prestigious events. Matt Lauer had achieved the pinnacle of television success, and everyone in the industry knew it. He was untouchable, or so he thought. Behind the camera, a very different Matt Lauer existed. While millions of Americans saw him as the friendly, trustworthy face of morning news, his colleagues at NBC were witnessing behavior that ranged from inappropriate to predatory. According to later investigations and testimony from multiple women, Matt had been using his position of power to pursue sexual relationships with subordinates, assistants, and junior employees for years. And it wasn't just consensual affairs between adults. The allegations painted a picture of a man who abused his authority, coerced vulnerable women, and created a toxic work environment where saying no to Matt Lauer could mean the end of your career. The pattern allegedly started as early as 2000. Multiple women who worked at NBC during that time period later came forward with similar stories. Matt would single out young, attractive employees, usually women in their 20s or early 30s, who were lower on the corporate ladder. He would start with compliments and attention, making them feel special and noticed by the most powerful man in the building. Then the behavior would escalate, inappropriate comments about their appearance, suggestive text messages, invitations to private meetings that had nothing to do with work, and eventually, according to several accusers, explicit sexual propositions that made it clear what he expected from them. What made this especially insidious was the power dynamic. Matt Lauer wasn't just a famous host, he had significant influence over hiring and firing decisions at NBC. He could make or break careers with a single word to executives. Women who worked with him understood this implicitly. Saying no to Matt Lauer meant risking your job, your reputation, and your future in television. Several women later described feeling trapped, knowing that if they rejected his advances, they might be pushed out of the network or blacklisted in the industry. And some alleged that when they did say no, Matt retaliated by making their work lives miserable or having them transferred to less desirable positions. But here comes the truly horrifying part. According to later reports, NBC management had received complaints about Matt's behavior for years before 2017. Multiple women had gone to human resources or supervisors to report inappropriate conduct, but nothing happened. Matt was too valuable. The Today Show was generating too much revenue. NBC executives allegedly looked the other way, either dismissing the complaints as misunderstandings or quietly paying settlements to make accusers go away without any publicity. The network had created an environment where Matt Lauer could act with impunity, knowing that his star power protected him from consequences. The culture at NBC during this time was, according to insiders, deeply dysfunctional. Matt allegedly had a button installed under his desk that would automatically lock his office door from the inside. Think about that for a moment. Why would someone need a secret button to lock their door during work hours? Multiple women later testified that Matt used this button to trap them in his office during inappropriate encounters. He also allegedly had private spaces within NBC's offices where he would bring women for sexual encounters during work hours. Colleagues knew about these spaces and referred to them in hushed tones, but nobody spoke up publicly. The message was clear. This is Matt Lauer's kingdom, and we don't question the king. Then came the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi, Russia. This was a massive event for NBC, with the network spending millions on coverage and sending dozens of employees to Russia for weeks. Matt was there as the lead anchor, living in luxury accommodations and conducting high-profile interviews with athletes and celebrities. Also, there was a young NBC employee named Brooke Nevels, who worked as an assistant to Matt's co-host Meredith Vieira. What happened in Sochi would eventually bring down Matt Lauer's entire empire. According to Brooke Nevels' later testimony, detailed in Ronan Farrow's book, Catch and Kill, Matt invited her to his hotel room one night after heavy drinking. What she described next was not a consensual encounter, but rape. She alleged that Matt anally raped her while she was too intoxicated to consent, that she repeatedly told him no and that it hurt, and that he continued anyway. She claimed she was in pain and crying, and that Matt was completely indifferent to her distress. The next morning, she said, Matt acted as if nothing had happened and warned her not to tell anyone. Brooke was traumatized, terrified, and had no idea what to do. She was in a foreign country, thousands of miles from home, and the man who had assaulted her was one of the most powerful people in television. Matt Lauer has vehemently denied these allegations, claiming that his encounter with Brooke Nevels was consensual and that her version of events is false. But Brooke's account was detailed, consistent, and corroborated by people she confided in shortly after the incident. She also provided evidence of the psychological damage the assault caused her, including therapy records and testimony from friends who witnessed her deterioration in the months and years following Sochi. This wasn't a he said, she said situation with no evidence. This was a woman providing a detailed, credible account of rape by one of the most famous men in America. But Brooke didn't immediately come forward publicly. Like many sexual assault survivors, she was terrified of the consequences. She knew Matt was powerful and beloved. She knew NBC had protected him before. She knew that speaking out could destroy her career and subject her to public scrutiny and disbelief. So she tried to move on, tried to pretend it hadn't happened, tried to survive in an environment where she had to see her rapist on television every single morning. The psychological toll was devastating. She struggled with depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Her work performance suffered, her personal relationships suffered, and through it all, Matt Lauer continued to smile on camera every morning, earning $25 million a year while the woman he allegedly raped tried to put her life back together. For 3 years, Brooke Nevels suffered in silence. But in late 2017, something changed. The Me Too movement exploded into public consciousness. with the Harvey Weinstein revelations. Women across every industry began coming forward with stories of sexual harassment and assault by powerful men. NBC itself had been rocked by the firing of Bill O'Reilly at Fox News and the allegations against Roger Ailes. The cultural moment had shifted, and suddenly, women were being believed in ways they hadn't been before. In November 2017, Brooke Nevils made the decision to formally report Matt Lauer's assault to NBC. On the evening of November 28th, she met with NBC executives and detailed what Matt had done to her in Sochi, as well as his pattern of inappropriate behavior before and after the assault. She provided documentation, timelines, and names of witnesses who could corroborate parts of her story. NBC leadership, including network president Andy Lack, took the complaint extremely seriously this time. Perhaps they had learned from their mishandling of other harassment cases. Or perhaps they realized that in the post-Weinstein era, covering up for Matt Lauer was no longer an option. The investigation moved with shocking speed. Within hours, NBC's legal team had interviewed multiple witnesses and reviewed evidence. What they found corroborated Brooke's account and revealed a pattern of behavior far worse than anyone had publicly known. By the early morning hours of November 29th, less than 24 hours after receiving the complaint, NBC executives had made their decision. Matt Lauer would be fired immediately. At 7 in the morning on November 30th, 2017, Savannah Guthrie and Hoda Kotb delivered the news that shocked America. Sitting on the same couch where Matt had sat for 20 years, Savannah's voice shook as she read a prepared statement. "This is a sad morning here at Today and at NBC News. As I'm sure you can understand, we are devastated. I'm heartbroken for Matt. He is my dear, dear friend and my partner, and he is beloved by many, many people here. I'm heartbroken for the brave colleague who came forward to tell her story and any other women who have their own stories to tell. And we are grappling with a dilemma that so many people have faced these past few weeks. How do you reconcile your love for someone with the revelation that they have behaved badly?" The statement continued with a message from NBC chairman Andy Lack. "On Monday night, we received a detailed complaint from a colleague about inappropriate sexual behavior in the workplace by Matt Lauer. It represented, after serious review, a clear violation of our company's standards. As a result, we've decided to terminate his employment." While it is the first complaint about his behavior in the over 20 years he's been at NBC News, we were also presented with reason to believe this may not have been an isolated incident. That last line was crucial. Reason to believe this may not have been an isolated incident. NBC was signaling that there were other victims, other stories, a pattern of predatory behavior, and they were right. Within hours of Matt's firing, the floodgates opened. By the end of that first day, 3 more women had contacted NBC with allegations against Matt. By the end of the week, that number had grown to at least 7. The stories were remarkably consistent. Matt Lauer had a pattern of targeting young female employees, using his power to coerce sexual encounters, and creating an atmosphere where women felt they couldn't say no without consequences. Some described quid pro quo situations, where Matt implied that sexual favors would lead to career advancement. Others described being summoned to his office and subjected to explicit sexual comments or requests. And several described situations that clearly constituted assault or coercion. The details that emerged in subsequent investigations were stomach-turning. According to Variety magazine's extensive report, Matt allegedly gave a colleague a sex toy as a gift, with an explicit note about how he wanted to use it on her. He allegedly exposed himself to another employee in his office. He allegedly sent lewd text messages and photos to multiple women who worked under him. One former employee described being called into Matt's office and finding him sitting with his pants unzipped, making it clear what he expected from her. Another described how Matt would make comments about her body and what he wanted to do to her, all while they were supposed to be working. Perhaps most damning were the allegations about Matt's use of NBC's facilities for sexual encounters. Multiple sources confirmed that Matt had spaces within NBC's offices that he used for private meetings that had nothing to do with work. Colleagues knew about these spaces and what they were used for, but nobody said anything publicly because Matt was too powerful to challenge. The network had effectively enabled his behavior by giving him the privacy, and access he needed to prey on women without interference. The public reaction was swift and brutal. Matt Lauer went from beloved morning show host to reviled predator literally overnight. Social media exploded with condemnation. Former colleagues distanced themselves as quickly as possible. Celebrities who had been interviewed by Matt over the years expressed shock and disgust. His Wikipedia page was updated within hours to reflect his firing and the allegations. The Today Show's ratings actually went up in the weeks following his departure, as viewers tuned in to watch how the show would handle the scandal. Matt Lauer had been erased from NBC in less than 48 hours, as if his 20-year tenure had never happened. But the personal consequences for Matt went far beyond losing his job. His wife Annette Roque, whom he had been married to for nearly 20 years, and with whom he had 3 children, filed for divorce in 2019. According to reports, she had known about some of Matt's affairs over the years, but had stayed with him for the sake of their children. The rape allegation and the public humiliation were apparently the final straw. The divorce was finalized quietly, and Annette reportedly received a settlement worth tens of millions of dollars from their shared assets. Matt's friendships evaporated just as quickly. Celebrities who had once called him a close friend suddenly refused to comment or issued statements distancing themselves. His former Today Show colleagues, including Savannah Guthrie and Al Roker, have barely mentioned his name since his firing. When they do, it's in the context of supporting his victims, not defending him. The message from Matt's former inner circle was clear. We don't stand with him. We stand with the women he hurt. Financially, Matt's fall was also significant, though he certainly didn't end up destitute. His contract with NBC was worth $25 million per year through 2018, but the morality clause in his contract allowed NBC to potentially claw back some of that money due to his misconduct. Reports vary on exactly how much Matt lost, but estimates suggest he forfeited somewhere between $10 and $20 million in remaining contract payments. Additionally, he lost all future earning potential from television work, speaking engagements, book deals, and other ventures that would have kept the money flowing for decades. His net worth, which was estimated at $80 million before his firing, has likely stagnated or even declined when accounting for divorce settlements, legal fees, and the complete loss of income. But perhaps the most significant consequence was the complete destruction of Matt's reputation and legacy. For 20 years, he had been one of the most recognizable faces in America. Parents trusted him to deliver the news while they got their kids ready for school. He had interviewed 5 presidents. He had covered natural disasters, terrorist attacks, royal weddings, and Olympic triumphs. He had been there for America's biggest moments for 2 decades. And in a single day, all of that was erased. His legacy wasn't his journalism or his interviews. His legacy was being a sexual predator who used his power to abuse women. In the immediate aftermath of his firing, Matt went silent. He retreated to his Hamptons estate and disappeared from public view. His first statement came nearly a week later, a carefully worded apology that tried to thread an impossible needle, acknowledging some wrongdoing while denying the most serious allegations. He wrote, "There are no words to express my sorrow and regret for the pain I have caused others by words and actions. To the people I have hurt, I am truly sorry. Some of what is being said about me is untrue or mischaracterized, but there is enough truth in these stories to make me feel embarrassed and ashamed. I regret that my shame is now shared by the people I cherish dearly." The statement was classic crisis management. Apologize for causing pain. Admit to some wrongdoing without specifying what. Deny the worst allegations without details and express shame. But it satisfied nobody. His victims found it insulting that he wouldn't take full responsibility. The public saw it as a politician's non-apology. And the media tore it apart, pointing out that Matt never actually specified which allegations were true and which were mischaracterized. Then came Brooke Neville's decision to go public. In 2019, she cooperated with journalist Ronan Farrow for his book, Catch and Kill, which exposed the mechanisms by which powerful men silence their accusers. Brooke's full account of what Matt allegedly did to her in Sochi was published in detail. She described the assault, the aftermath, and how NBC had allegedly pressured her to stay quiet even after she reported it. The book became a bestseller, and Brooke's story became the definitive account of Matt Lauer's fall from grace. Matt responded with a lengthy, angry letter that was published on various media outlets. In it, he denied raping Brooke Nevels and claimed their sexual encounter was completely consensual. He described his version of events, which painted Brooke as a willing participant who later regretted the encounter. He accused her of rewriting history and attacked Ronan Farrow's journalism. The letter was full of defensive anger and read like a man who couldn't believe his version of events wasn't being accepted as truth. But here's the problem with Matt's defense. Even in his own version of events, he admitted to having sex with a subordinate employee while they were both working at the Olympics, after a night of heavy drinking in his hotel room. Even if it was consensual, as he claimed, it was still a massive abuse of power and a clear violation of workplace ethics. The fact that Matt couldn't see why this was problematic, even in the best-case scenario, showed how disconnected he had become from normal standards of professional behavior. The public wasn't buying his denials. Brooke Nevels had nothing to gain from lying. She had tried to remain anonymous, only going public after NBC allegedly leaked her identity to the media. She had detailed, specific memories of the assault that were corroborated by therapy records and contemporaneous conversations with friends. She had every reason to stay silent and avoid the public scrutiny that comes with accusing a powerful man of rape. The fact that she came forward anyway, knowing the backlash she would face, gave her account enormous credibility. Meanwhile, other women who had accused Matt of misconduct expressed frustration that the focus was on the Sochi incident when there were so many other examples of his predatory behavior. At least a dozen women had come forward with their own stories by this point, creating a pattern that was impossible to ignore. This wasn't one bad decision or one misunderstanding. This was decades of systematically abusing power, targeting vulnerable women, and using NBC's infrastructure to facilitate misconduct. Matt's few remaining defenders tried to argue that he was being unfairly lumped in with actual rapists like Harvey Weinstein, that his behavior, while inappropriate, wasn't violent or criminal. But this argument fell flat for several reasons. First, multiple women had described his behavior as coercive and non-consensual, which is sexual assault regardless of whether physical force was used. Second, the power dynamics made true consent impossible in many of these situations. When your boss, who can fire you or destroy your career, pressures you for sex, that's not consent, that's coercion. And third, even if some encounters were technically consensual, the pattern of behavior showed a man who viewed female employees as sexual objects for his gratification, which created a hostile work environment for everyone. The legal consequences for Matt have been minimal compared to the reputational damage. No criminal charges have been filed, likely because of the difficulty of prosecuting sexual assault cases, especially those that occurred years ago in foreign countries. NBC apparently paid Brooke Nevels a settlement of approximately 7 figures to resolve her claims, though the exact amount was never disclosed. Matt also likely paid settlements to other accusers to avoid lawsuits, though again, the details remain confidential due to non-disclosure agreements. But the lack of criminal consequences doesn't mean Matt got away with anything. He lost the career he had spent 40 years building. He lost his marriage and family. He lost friendships and professional relationships. He lost his reputation and his place in television history. And he lost any chance of redemption or comeback. Unlike some other men caught up in the Me Too movement who have attempted returns to public life, Matt Lauer remains radioactive. No network will hire him. No publication will work with him. No legitimate platform will give him airtime. He is effectively blacklisted from the industry he once dominated. In the years since his firing, Matt has been spotted occasionally in the Hamptons or New York City, usually looking haggard and attempting to avoid photographers. He sold his Hamptons estate in 2019 for $44 million, possibly to fund his divorce settlement and legal fees. He has not given any major interviews or made any public appearances. He has no social media presence. He has essentially vanished from public life, living off his remaining wealth in obscurity. Some people might argue that this is punishment enough. That Matt has lost everything that mattered to him and is living in shame and isolation. But his victims would likely disagree. They would point out that Matt still has millions of dollars and gets to live in luxury while they deal with the trauma he inflicted. They would note that he never faced criminal prosecution for his alleged crimes. They would observe that he still hasn't taken full accountability for what he did, continuing to deny some allegations and minimize others. The broader question is what Matt Lauer's fall tells us about power, accountability, and workplace culture. For decades, NBC enabled Matt's behavior because he was too valuable to discipline. They received complaints and did nothing. They knew about his inappropriate conduct and looked the other way. They created an environment where women couldn't safely report abuse without fear of retaliation. And they only took action when the public pressure became too great to ignore and when protecting Matt would have cost them more than firing him. This is the same pattern we've seen at Fox News, at CBS, at Miramax, at countless other corporations where powerful men were protected until the cost of protecting them exceeded their value. The lesson isn't that the system worked and justice was served. The lesson is that the system only works when victims are brave enough to come forward in massive numbers, when journalists are willing to investigate despite intimidation, and when public outrage becomes too loud to silence. What makes Matt Lauer's case particularly infuriating is how long it went on. This wasn't a recent problem that NBC quickly addressed. According to multiple reports, Matt had been engaging in inappropriate conduct for at least 15 years before he was fired. 15 years of women being harassed, coerced, and assaulted. 15 years of complaints being ignored. 15 years of NBC choosing profit over the safety and dignity of their employees. The number of women whose careers and lives were damaged by Matt Lauer during that time is impossible to calculate, but it's certainly more than the dozen or so who came forward publicly. And here's what's especially galling. Matt knew he was doing wrong. He had that secret button to lock his office door. He conducted his affairs in hidden spaces. He warned women not to tell anyone. He used his power to silence complaints. These aren't the actions of someone who thought his behavior was acceptable. These are the actions of someone who knew exactly what he was doing, knew it was wrong, and calculated that he could get away with it because of his power and value to the network. For 20 years, that calculation was correct. Matt did get away with it. He lived like a king, earned a fortune, and maintained his reputation as America's favorite morning show host while systematically abusing women behind the scenes. It was only when the cultural moment shifted, when women started being believed in unprecedented numbers, when the cost of protecting abusers became higher than the cost of firing them, that Matt's behavior finally caught up with him. So what's Matt Lauer's legacy? It's not his interviews with presidents or his Olympic coverage or his 20 years on the Today Show. His legacy is being one of the most prominent faces of the Me Too movement's reckoning with powerful men who abuse their positions. His legacy is being a case study in how corporations enable predators until they can't anymore. His legacy is being a cautionary tale about the consequences of believing you're above the rules. At 66 years old, Matt Lauer is effectively retired, though not by choice. He has no career prospects, no path back to public life, and no way to repair his destroyed reputation. He lives off his remaining wealth in relative obscurity, a fallen king who lost his throne and can never get it back. Some might see this as justice, others might see it as insufficient given the pain he caused. But everyone can agree on this. The man who woke up millions of Americans every morning for 20 years will never be welcomed back into their homes again. What do you think? Did NBC do enough to hold Matt Lauer accountable, or should they have acted sooner when they first received complaints? Do powerful men in media get away with abuse for too long because they're too valuable to fire? And can someone like Matt Lauer ever truly be redeemed, or should he remain in exile forever? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to see more stories of celebrities and public figures who fell from grace, hit that subscribe button and let us know who we should cover next. Should we dive into Kevin Spacey's Hollywood downfall? Bill Cosby's criminal conviction? Or maybe Harvey Weinstein's empire of abuse? This has been Celebrities Done. Thanks for watching, and remember, no one is too powerful to fall when the truth finally comes out.